you for joining us for tonight's conversation. I am State Representative Serena Gonzalez Gutierrez, and I represent House District 4, located in Northwest and West Denver, a community that my family has called home for the last 3 generations, and I'm incredibly honored to be able to serve the community that I am from. In the House of Representatives, I also serve in leadership as the Assistant Majority Leader, and I also sit on the Public and Behavioral Health Committee, which is incredibly important for the conversation we're about to have this evening. I've worked in the child welfare and juvenile justice fields for the last 18 years, where I've been everything from a line staff at the Division of Youth Services to an ongoing youth social caseworker with the Department of Human Services to the director of the Denver Collaborative Partnership, which I currently still do that work. And I work with children, youth, and families that find themselves involved in multiple systems such as in child welfare, juvenile justice, education, and mental health. And our organization works with those families to help them navigate the very complex systems that they're faced with. We work with our system partners to break down silos and ensure that we are keeping youth and families from even entering the system in the first place. Youth justice is incredibly important to me, not only because I'm a mother and I have 3 wonderful children of my own, but I've also devoted my career to making sure that young people have the opportunities that they need to be successful and to find ways to decrease further system involvement, specifically into the juvenile justice system. That's why this session, I've decided to make youth issues a priority. Whether it is fighting for free school lunch for our students or allocating funds towards juvenile justice prevention and behavioral health for children, youth, and families, to raising the minimum age a child can be charged as a juvenile from the age of 10 to 13, to making changes in current law regarding restitution for youth involved in the juvenile justice system. I believe in the work of mirror image arts. Together, we are working to disrupt the school to prison pipeline. And specifically tonight, we will address youth restitution. For folks that might need just a little level set, I want to talk about what restitution is right now. Restitution in the justice system involves a defendant that has been convicted or, in the case of juveniles, adjudicated for a crime, and they are ordered to repay monetarily for damages or harm that has been caused to victims. Along with mirror image arts, and thanks to their advocacy, we are working to introduce a bill that would no longer allow for insurance companies to go after youth for repayment when the youth has already been ordered to pay restitution that would go into the Victims' Compensation Fund and to the victims of the crime themselves. We are hoping to clarify that insurance companies are not victims and are not owed restitution. This bill would not impact restitution owed to victims, and I think this will help generate more conversations about restorative justice practices where youth can take accountability and take part in repairing the harm that has been done to others. I'm incredibly thankful to Mirror Image Arts and to the young people that we have worked with through the Urban Leader Fellowship over the summer that have helped raise and lift this issue up so that we can continue the work as we go through this legislative session. And now, over the next few minutes, you will hear from the young people that the legal system impacts, and then we will move into our conversation. We are glad you're here. Thank you for joining us for Disrupt, from conversation to commitment. We're glad you're here. Have a wonderful evening.
After I was released, I felt like I had some sense of freedom, but at the same time I didn't.
9 days exactly after my 13th birthday, I was locked up. It was tough. It takes a toll on you mentally.
It's difficult to be able to get a job, get housing even.
My restitution was about $14,000. It was crushing. Like, I'd had no choice on it. The only thought in my mind was to get through it or just give up. And at that point, the first thought was give up.
My name's Terrence. I don't go by anything else but Terrence. Terrence. It's up to you. I hate you. I'm in the theater forever, literally forever.
I've had the same nightmare every night since October 28, 2017. I first got caught up in the system when I was 14. I owed $2,000 in restitution fees. I didn't have a job and I didn't know how to read. My mom was working a minimum wage job and couldn't help me pay it off, so I didn't. I was locked up in Lookout Mountain Youth Services Center until 2021. From the beginning, I knew I had restitution, but I never knew how much it was. It wasn't until halfway through my sentence that my PO called to tell me how much I owed. $256,420.85. At first, I couldn't comprehend how much money that actually meant. I realized I wasn't going to college. I wondered, if I pay $100 a month, how many years will it take me to pay that off? At this rate, 213 years. I'll be in debt for the rest of my life.
I come from a place where violence is a norm and abuse is overlooked.
I'm going to a place that's beautiful for me and my family. What I'm most hopeful about? Going back to school so I can get my business degree. I want to open my own company someday.
I'm most hopeful about my work right now, actually. I'm really working hard about it. I never knew what I wanted to do in life. And he was like, hey, I got this chimney chopped. And I was like, cool. And now I love it. I love my job.
I'm most hopeful that, I could make my way in this world.
I love that I got to bring my daughter into this world. I'm very happy. She's changed my life for the 5 days that she's been in it so far.
What are you most hopeful about?
Nothing. I'm too busy living in the modern. I'm too busy living now and focusing to build so that way I can have a chance to find a future.
Before I introduce our panelists, I want to thank some folks. First, Representative Gonzalez Gutierrez for welcoming everyone tonight and for advocating for all youth in Colorado. And I also want to thank our Restorative Youth alumni for offering their time and talent and for sharing their stories with us, as you saw in the video. I also want to do a shout out to some folks behind the scenes, Teresa Maza, Lauren Sagendorf, Maya Osterman, and the programs team, and Maddie Heiken on our advocacy team. Before I introduce our panel, we'd like to acknowledge the Indigenous people and the land, the unceded land of the broader Denver area. We honor and acknowledge that we are on the traditional territories and ancestral homelands of the Cheyenne and Arapaho nations. This area was also the site of trade, hunting, gathering, and healing for many other Native nations, the Lakota, Ute, Kiowa, Comanche, Apache, Shoshone, and others. We recognize the Indigenous peoples as the original stewards of the land, water, plants, and animals who called this place home. Let us also acknowledge the painful history of genocide and forced removal from this territory.
We respect the many diverse Indigenous peoples currently connected to this land on which we gather. We pay our respect to them and give thanks to all tribal nations and the ancestors of this place. We also want to recognize the community and families of the River North and Five Points area who have experienced and currently are experiencing displacement even now. Now, it's my distinct honor to introduce our panelists. Joining the conversation tonight is Philip Roybal, Dr. Apryl Alexander, and Shawn Pollack. And to moderate our conversation, the Executive Director of Mirror Image Arts, Andrea Rabold. Andrea, I kick it over to you.
Hello, everyone. Hey, thanks, Julie Rada, for that beautiful introduction. I am so happy to be here with all of you tonight, and I am so grateful to be sharing in conversation tonight with Apryl Alexander, Philip Roybal, and Shawn Pollack. I'm super inspired by their stories, and I am so grateful that they're joining us in conversation here tonight. So I know that we don't have much time, and we've had these beautiful introductions before us, so let's dig into the conversation. I would love for my panelists to introduce themselves through this question: what brings you to the work? And I'll actually start with you, Apryl. Go first.
Hi, once again, thank you, Mirror Image Arts, for having me and for facilitating this panel. I'm Dr. Apryl Alexander. I'm currently a professor in the Graduate School of Professional Psychology at the University of Denver. My background and training in this space is in clinical and forensic psychology, where I've worked in a bunch of different systems, whether it's adult correctional systems, forensic mental health, and juvenile detention facilities. I think over the years, my work has shifted in after hearing the stories of our youth, similar to what we saw in the video, that we have some incredible youth that are institutionalized, criminalized in so many different ways. And many of them want to be on the pathway to success. They want to be thriving young adults and people in our community, and they're going to return to our communities. But sometimes our public policy responses are not amenable to their needs. If we want to support these young people to be healthy and thriving, then we need to offer those supports. So I think over the years in witnessing these stories, listening to our young people, thinking about how power, privilege, and oppression contributes to some of these systemic inequities, I've wanted to dedicate my life to really thinking about how do we reform and or dismantle parts of our juvenile criminal legal system. And so that's why I'm glad to be here today to talk about this upcoming bill in hopes that we make a change for our young people.
Thank you, Dr. Apryl. How about you, Philip? Let's go to you. What brings you to the work?
Hi, guys. Thank you for inviting me into this space. My name is Philip, and I'm the Youth Justice Organizing Manager at Colorado Circles for Change. That position is in partnership with the National Center for Youth Law. I sit on what's called the Youth Justice Initiative team. I feel that this work is very much personal to me. My social justice lens has always kind of been brought about more through coaching and mentoring youth within the Denver metro area. I came to work with Colorado Circles for Change about 1.5 years ago, where I was providing health and wellness programming to some of the youth and the staff. Once I was presented with this opportunity to join the Youth Justice Initiative team and look at policy work, I'd have to honestly say that I was hesitant in the beginning just because policy work is not my strong suit per se. But however, understanding true systematic change, it has to occur from the top down and the bottom up. There has been numerous people within my community, as well as coaches, community organizations, that have played a pivotal point in my life in terms of turning it around from being in DYC as well as DOC as a teenager and a young man. That helps me to understand that I need to now be the pivotal point to look at the generations that come behind me. I want to say that I'm just naturally I'm drawn back to my community. I'm naturally drawn back to my work. And when I was asked to speak on this panel, there was no hesitation. I'm extremely grateful for the opportunity and would hope that me sharing my lived experience can help those that come before me or after me.
Thank you, Philip. Really appreciate that. Shawn, what brings you to the work?
Hi. Hi, my name's Shawn. What brings me to this work is like I'm living it firsthand, and like I want to get my story out there and just help everybody like that comes after me, and just try to make some change.
Thanks, Shawn. See y'all can see why I wanted to talk to them tonight. Thank you so much for sharing your stories, y'all. So one of the things that we often ask in our programs to our young people is we ask them to finish this sentence. And I think everybody heard that in the video tonight. So I'd love for each of you to finish this sentence. I come from a place. Shawn, I'm actually going to start with you.
I come from a place that's broken, chaotic, and lost.
Thank you. I come from a place.
I come from a place where on the surface it feels lost, broken, and unorganized, but underneath that there was still a lot of love.
Dr. Apryl Alexander, I come from a place.
I come from a place of compassion, empathy, and wanting to seek change.
Thank you. So audience, this is actually an opportunity for you also to engage. I'm going to ask this next question, and we'd love to hear from you on the Jamboard or in the chat of the Facebook room, whichever. I think we're going to a place that's, Philip, I'll start with you this time. Oh, Philip, you are on mute.
Will you repeat that one more time? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so here's the next sentence. I think we're going to a place that's.
I think we're going to a place that is a huge shift within our social consciousness. One of the things that I feel is that I'm very much impressed by the younger generations that I'm coming to work with and learn from. So we are coming to a new consciousness playing field.
Love that. Dr. Apryl, I think we're going to a place that's.
I think we're going to a place where liberation is the aim.
Shawn, I think we're going to a place that's.
I think we're going to a place that's going to have change, have us come together as a community.
Thank you all. I really appreciate your thoughts on where you think we're headed. One of the things I think about often in doing this work, because sometimes it's really, really tough work, and you hear a lot of stories of people that are impacted by our policies and the ways that we've set up our systems. And there is not a lot of space for healing, a lot of space for integration. And it's just hard. It's hard hearing those stories. And I just think it's really helpful. I always find it helpful when we're talking about these things to also remember that we get to play and use our imaginations. I mean, somebody created these systems, right? They imagined these systems. And I think that we can collectively imagine new ways of being together. So thanks for answering that. So now let's dive into the current system. That's the system that we're in. We saw from the video that there's just so many challenges that our young people face after being involved in the criminal legal system. I mean, there's so many challenges our young people face in general, but coming out of the criminal legal system, we heard a few of them from the video, but actually, Philip, I want to go to you first. Can you add from your experience, like what else would you add to the things that they mentioned in the video about what is hard about returning back to community after facing the criminal legal system?
You know, funny enough, I honestly forgot about my own kind of experience until we started talking about this restitution bill. And, you know, kind of looking back, I got caught in a stolen car when I was probably about 11 or 12 years old. I wasn't even old enough to go to jail at the time, so I got taken to a group home. Later on, when I turned 18, I got pulled over and I was driving, and at that point in time, I had a hold on my license. And the hold on my license was because of the time that I got caught in the stolen car when I was 11 years old. At that point in time, there still was restitution and fees, and there was like a hold on my license and all these things that kept me from moving forward. At the time, I didn't understand what that was. I just kind of I took it on the chin and I rolled with the punches, and I try to make it work. Fortunately enough for me, I had a strong support system. My father was there. I had children really young, so I had my partner who was within my life was a very, very strong support. But unfortunately, a lot of our youth don't have that. And so I want to say that I was privileged enough to have that support, to kind of be a little more removed. But, looking back, that definitely was a barrier. It took me a long time. I unfortunately, I didn't get like a real driver's license until I was about 24 or 25 years old. And that stemmed from something that happened when I was 11 years old.
Wow. I really appreciate you sharing that with me, Philip, with all of us. I'm curious to know based on your experience, you also now work for CCFC and you're working with young people. Are there any other, I just want to make sure that we allow for their voice to be heard in this space today too. Like, are they facing other challenges in addition to all of the ones that have been named?
Yeah, the recurring theme is a lot of our youth, I feel like, are more empathetic. They have more empathy and they feel a little deeper. And so, like I've said, I feel like there's a stronger social conscious shift within our youth, and a lot of the things that I see them having to deal with is not only do they understand and recognize some of the issues within their own self, but they understand that it's a mental health issue. Whereas they're getting more of an emotional intelligence response. Whereas for me, I was like, yo, that's just normal. I'm supposed to be upset. I'm supposed to be mad. I'm supposed to not want to talk about my feelings and kind of just shut them down because I'm not supposed to communicate with anybody that wasn't within my household. I was not supposed to share anything that was going on. However, the youth that I see now, they're more than willing to share, and they have an understanding of what that is. Fortunately and unfortunately, it causes them to feel a little deeper, and sometimes it takes them into different places. So it is a strength that they're able to kind of have that emotional intelligence. That I'm 38 years old now, and it's taken me a long time to be able to even just comfortably sit within spaces like this and share my own past. I went through a clinical kind of program with an undergrad, and I didn't even tell anybody I had kids, let alone that I had 2 felonies and I was walking on a college campus on parole. Whereas our youth now, they're more willing to sit within those feelings, whereas I shunned them and I hid from them. I've been lucky enough to be supported by a great structure at CCFC, and the women in that organization believed in me before I believed in myself. So our youth now have that understanding of their own emotional talents at a younger age, right? So I feel like it's up to us to solidify and give them those skill sets in order to kind of use that energy to produce more change.
Totally. I think that's such an interesting call out that you're saying that our young people are actually tapping more into their emotional feelings and their what's really interesting to me is that there's a lot of adults in their lives who also, to what you just said, Philip, haven't actually done that for themselves. So how can they actually do that for somebody else? Check it. Nice hat. And I think that's part of the challenge, right? Even if they're willing to access those emotions, we as adults on the other side may not actually be capable of hearing them or supporting them or helping them get resources for them in order to support them. So even tapping into those emotions isn't all that's necessary in order to feel really truly connected to those emotions and what's happening for them. Thank you for sharing that, Philip. So y'all heard this in the video, and Shawn, I'm just so grateful that we've continued to be able to be in relationship with you and that you're willing to share your story and be with us tonight. But everyone, in the summer of 2020, Shawn shared his story of owing over $250,000 in restitution. And we were, you can just imagine a lot of the, I know that this is happening for everyone on this call. It's happened to everybody that I've shared this story with. There is just this immediate body reaction. There's this immediate like feeling of, oh my God, my, that's college. That's a house payment. I wish now, I mean, house payments are higher, but still, it's still like right up there. And yet those loans that are there have less than, 4%, 5% interest rates on them. Our young people at $250,000, Shawn is also accruing interest at 8%. So there was just a lot for us to understand as we were taking in Shawn's story. Plus on top of that, also trying to be there for Shawn as he was hearing this story. And we also wanted to know just how many young people we were working with were actually facing what Shawn was facing. And so we do what we do at Mirror Image Arts. We went and we asked other incarcerated youth. And the truth was, we found out from all of the youth that we asked the question to, 40% of the young people that we interviewed shared that they owed restitution, and that many of them owed the six-figure restitution that Shawn did. So very, very quickly, we were schooled. We were schooled in understanding what restitution was in the first place. We were schooled under the, like we had no idea that we were even doing this to young people, like we were laying this debt on our young people. And then to find out that 40% of the young people that we asked questions of in just one facility shared that they also owed it. So we felt, in truth, shocked. We honestly felt a little hopeless, like all of the work that we were doing to support a youth's reintegration into community felt impossible when they were facing what we've now come to understand is a life sentence in debt. And so Shawn, this is the question I just want to ask you. You were about to get out of the detention facility when you found out that you owed that $250,000. What did you feel in your body when you found that out?
It was heartbreaking, honestly, because like you said, it's a big number. And when I first got told it, I didn't know how big of a number it was until I asked the staff, and they made a joke saying it was a phone number. And like thinking back, like it's crazy to think about. Like it's like you said, it's a life sentence. Like there's nothing I can change about it. And it's something I have to worry about every day. Like it's like I have to pay it every month faithfully. And it's really hard because like I'm in a halfway house right now, and I'm getting out in a couple months, and I'm gonna be on my own. It's still gonna be there. And it's just something that I can't change. And that's just the harsh reality.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Shawn. One of the things that deeply resonated with me was when you asked us to do the math, and you were like working real hard at paying $100 a month when you didn't even know how you were going to do that, getting out. But you were like, okay, let's just pick a number. Can you just tell me how long it would take me to pay off if I could pay $100 a month? And do you remember that experience, finding out how long that would be?
It was crazy because I don't even think I can live that long, you know? It's like whenever I pass away, like who's gonna have to pick on that debt? My kids? Like, is it gonna have to be passed down? So now my kids are in debt because of a mistake I made when I was 15 years old?
Yeah, thank you, Shawn. And just to remind everyone, it was in the video, but it to pay off at $100 a month, it would take 213. Was it 213 years, Shawn?
Yes, ma'am.
Or 211, 213. And that was paying at $100 a month. And we also shared that it accrues at 8% interest every single year as well. Apryl, let's go to you for a second. I'm just curious, like, what is the developmental community-based psychology show about all of this? Like, what is your experience? What are you thinking as you sit and listen to this?
I'm heartbroken, first of all, especially when you hear about the numbers like the 8% interest. Think about that amount. As you just heard, the 213 years, that's overwhelming for myself as an adult And I'm sure that is more than overwhelming for our youth and young people. You know, we often think about these collateral consequences for youth when they come into contact with the legal system. Having this being over their head and thinking about what does that do for them. Our hope was that the juvenile legal system was centered around rehabilitation. Of course, it's also centered on accountability, which again, many of our young people have faced, and they're remorseful and empathic for the mistakes that they made as youth. But also rehabilitation and thinking about how do we make sure that they are healthy, thriving young people and young adults. So knowing that you have to make this payment when you already have barriers to maybe getting a job, getting into school. When I heard Philip speak, he mentioned having this support system of women for him. And he also mentioned that not everybody has that. We know that a young person having one trusted adult is so important as a protective factor from engaging in future crime and just being well from a mental health perspective. So with this hanging over a young person as they're already developing their identity and trying to get a sense of self, it blocks you. It makes you think about hopelessness. It makes you think about who am I going forward with this debt? And that's all people are going to see. And that's all that I have to think about. It's hard to concentrate when you are thinking about all these things. It's hard to enjoy your life and the things that you want to enjoy, your hobbies, when you're paying this extra $100 a month on top of just trying to make a living in an urban city where, you know, cost of living is going up as a whole. So my message to people is, yes, this happens to youth. I don't know if everybody knows that. And then two, we really need to think carefully about these collateral consequences that come out as a result of people having contact, youth having contact with the legal system, and how to disrupt that.
Yeah, thank you. I'm actually just conscientious of this and just want to label it. Shawn, I'm just curious, this is part of the story that you're living. Anything else coming up for you as you heard Dr. Apryl talk about that?
No, it's just like she has great points, to the point like we're just starting off our life, you know, and that's just something else that just has to get, you have to worry about. That's another thing that you have to worry about. And
yeah,
that's crazy to think about.
Yeah. Thank you. So I'm going to kind of switch gears just a little bit, still same topic, obviously, but something else that came up for me as we started this exploration of restitution and just started asking people questions on both sides, like sides of those that believe this to be accountability, believe this to be a restorative justice mechanism, all the way through to people who are in full, you know, abolition of this. We just had some really interesting conversations. And one thing that just kept coming up for me was this binary between, in the system, between the, like we say offender and we say victim. And I just had to sit with that for a while after hearing it multiple times and witnessing in the system how it shows up and how necessary it is in order for us to be able to do what we do in the system and place judgments. And I just couldn't help but like sort of, you know, work it alongside of what we believe at Mirror Image Arts to our core, which is about like, we're very, very intentional about not labeling people. We actually use the word, like for example, we do work that's around bullying. And we were very, very clear at the very, very beginning, we will not say bullies, we won't say victims, we're gonna say people who are doing the bullying, people who are being victimized by bullying. Same thing here, can we use the words people are, people who committed a crime and people who were on the receiving end of a crime or victimized by a crime. But like, I just think that language is really, really important, and that choosing to keep the person separate from the action, separate from the action is the belief that there are complicated reasons why we all do what we do. And that also to label people is to remain stuck with no power to change that. And I'm just curious, like I'll get to the question, I promise. The judicial system is predicated on this binary. And it seems like it's necessary to call people victim and offender. And honestly, in my opinion, it feels like they need those labels to justify the punishments. But there is substantial evidence that's coming out now that is suggesting that shows that this is a false binary. And this finally started answering the questions that were coming up for me. Many people who cause harm have also experienced harm. And yet we can put them in these two neat categories, offender and victim. Apryl, can you speak a little bit about this in your experience? Like, what does the research show about who's involved in experiencing or perpetrating harm?
Yeah, this conversation is really difficult. My own research has also been in the area of trauma for youth in the criminal legal system. And in my study that came out last year, just reflecting on the youth that I used to work with, some of them had experienced 16 different types of trauma before coming into detention with us. And that's just types of trauma. That doesn't mean how many times you've experienced some of these 16 types. So when we have these binaries of victim and offender, well, some of my youth have been both. And so recognizing what hat that puts on, 90% of girls in the juvenile legal system have experienced physical or sexual abuse. So, I just got a federal grant in 2020 to create the Denver First Juvenile Justice Project to provide trauma treatment services to at promise or legal involved girls because of that statistic. What if they had treatment years ago? What if they had access to all of this years ago when they experienced violence themselves? Would that have possibly kept them out the system? Could we have gotten them help? Could we have helped them heal? Could we have helped them heal to the point where they're not causing harm to others? These binary labels don't make sense. These binary labels are with you for the rest of your life for one mistake you've made. I've made mistakes in my life, but those mistakes aren't brought up every time I try to get a job, every time I'm at school, every time I'm at work, every time I'm trying to get an apartment. So thinking about the harms of these labels, they actually make you feel more disconnected and dehumanized. So I love the push that mirror image arts and so many others are doing around person-centered language. Let's put that humanity back on these children and not have them hold this label for the rest of their lives for that one mistake that they've done.
Yeah, I'm actually curious, Apryl, from your perspective, if that's, you provided so much evidence just now, so much proof of the need to put person-centric language in. Why are we not changing to that in our systems, specifically the judicial system?
Well, again, people really think that by using this person-centered language, we're not holding people accountable, and that's just not true. We're still holding people accountable, but recognizing their humanity, their dignity, the need for respect and empathy. These young people don't just want to go out and commit crimes. Things have happened to them and they made mistakes. They're young. The research on cognitive and adolescent brain development, they're still working through life. Like I said, finding their identity, finding their footing, sometimes making mistakes that are heinous, but that doesn't mean they can't be rehabilitated. And so I think there's this hesitancy to go to person-centered language and saying that we're removing accountability, but that's not what we're doing. We're still holding young people accountable, but recognizing that they're people.
Yeah. Thanks, Dr. Apryl. Philip, I want to go to you next. What are you thinking about all of this so far? Specifically about what Apryl said. Yeah.
I feel like this, at least within the judicial system, I think we could take this as far back as this is like a Western expansion of good and bad, right? This is now the result of a Castilian social classism way of placing people. And this is just how we see it in this day and age. Whereas it's colorism, right? Where white is right, anything dark is bad, it's ominous, it's scary, right? It's social classism, right? It's the oligarchs or the royalty and those that work with their hands. this now good and bad within the judicial system are those same people who have set these standards through their own lens. I think this, for the lack of a better word, when we're looking at indigenous practices before the westward expansion of the Christian and Catholic religions on this side of the world, there was very much more of a holistic approach into the way that we looked at things. They truly would see that it takes a village to raise a child. It was not a good or bad thing. It was this act that happened, and there was harm that was created. Now let's repair the harm, and let's move forward, right? Whereas now within our judicial system, in order to repair the harm, it takes monetary value, right? So in that essence, I can see how I'll play devil's advocate just for a small moment where you need to be held responsible for certain things. I can see how that will give a platform for having an understanding of what your actions are. I just don't feel that it's monetary. I don't think it's a monetary thing.
Yeah, you're bringing up like such an interesting point too, that we've experienced, that what happens when you start talking about accountability and how it actually gets shrunk really quickly into one simple solution, which is in capitalism, it's money. And that's accountability. And so I just heard you name other ways in which accountability can be held, and that we actually have a lot of history, like not white bodies, but bodies of culture have a lot of history with bringing folks back into community after something has happened. Thank you, Philip. Shawn, I go to you because you and I have had conversations about what it's felt like to be labeled an offender. What would you like to, I'm just curious to know what you're thinking about as you listen to this and what your experience has been.
Like, it's crazy when you hear somebody like just say it, like, hey, you're an aggravated juvenile offender. And it's just like, does that make me a different person? I get treated different, you know? Like trying to go up in front of a parole board, they're like, oh, well, it's gonna take more steps because you're an aggravated offender. And I take full accountability for what I've done in the past. I know what I did was wrong, but it's a label that sticks with you, and it just doesn't go anywhere until you're out of the system. And sometimes it's just like, it stays with you for the rest of your life.
I'm curious, like, I know you just named the one that's specific to offender. Have other labels been used for you?
The biggest one is like, people always like criminal, like, oh, you're a criminal. Like that's another word for just like, I would say, judging people on their past. Everyone makes mistakes. Everyone does certain things in their past, but some things are more worse than others, you know? But some things stick with you for the rest of your life.
Thank you for sharing that, Shawn. One of the things I heard you say is that we all make wrong choices. And I do think what's interesting about that language too is that it sort of separates me from you. It separates my belief, even in that singular moment of calling you a criminal, it can separate my belief that I would ever become one. And that's what's so interesting about labels too, is that we all actually have equal, like, depending on our stories and depending on what's happening to us, we all actually have equal access to possibly committing a crime based on whatever's happening in our life. So thank you for sharing that, Shawn. I want to complicate the truth just a little bit even further because we've already talked about the binary, but as I've also journeyed in the advocacy space, I've witnessed on multiple occasions, people say that restitution is a form of restorative justice. And I know I've already mentioned that. And in my mind and heart, this statement is complicated for a variety of reasons. I know this is a sticky topic. I'm grateful that y'all are willing to participate in this conversation with me. And I'm bringing it up because I know a lot of people on this call are thinking the same thing, and I've heard it multiple times when I've ever introduced it. Like, if you did know about restitution, it's like, but I thought that was a restorative justice thing. Um, why? Well, I lost track. Hang on just a second. Let me find my question again. Why are we calling it restorative justice? Can anybody answer that? Like, why might this be considered a restorative justice principle?
I feel like it's our modern day T-tax.
Mm.
Right. In order for things to be repaired, there has to be an exchange of goods. However, the exchange of goods here has a monetary value. It's a piece of paper. That's how you pay homage, pay respect, pay your restitution back. That is a very much a colonial capitalist point of view. This is not Boston, and the Boston Tea Party happened a long time ago.
Thanks, Philip. Dr. Apryl, you want to weigh in? Shawn?
Very similar. This is rooted in colonial practices throughout history in ways that are just really just harmful and detrimental. A true kind of restorative justice practices would have started from the beginning. We wouldn't have even started with the whole criminal legal system and the criminalization process. In some of the restitution, the individuals who've been harmed don't even get a say in it. So for some of them, is finances the answer? Maybe I want an apology letter. Maybe I want a sit down conversation and all these other things that this might not even be the repair that a person wants. And sometimes we order this thing on our youth. The systems do. They speak on behalf of those individuals. So it's not a collaborative restorative justice process. It's not collectivist in nature, where restorative justice was rooted. People are misusing restorative justice, not looking at the origins of it in Indigenous history and African history and things like that. They weren't talking in this, again, what Philip was saying, capitalist way.
Thank you. Something that you said resonated deeply with my experience through this process, and that is that that oftentimes victims, those that have been victimized by a crime, have no other way for their voice to be heard other than through the restitution process. And I thought that was actually a really interesting point. If we say that we're a victims advocacy state, and Colorado they're very, very strong in saying that they are a victims advocacy state, how is it that a lot of the people who have been victimized by crime will say that they're fighting for their voice to even be heard? They're fighting to say what it is they need to be made whole and to heal and to integrate, and that it is way more complicated after being victimized by a crime than just receiving money. And that does help. In some ways it does help, but in a lot of ways it's actually not even really contributing to what actually might make them feel whole.
Yeah, I want to point out more language tonight. I've really appreciated in this space how we keep saying criminal legal system as opposed to criminal justice system.
Yeah.
Because when we speak to victims and ask about, was this system just and fair to you, they're also saying no. So that's another kind of call to action for, we need to relook at this process and maybe make it truly restorative.
Yeah. Thank you. Shawn, thoughts on this conversation? What are you thinking?
Both of y'all hit the nail right on the head. It was like, for me, I never really thought of it like that. And then hearing it from other people's perspective, it taught me something new.
Thanks, Shawn. I think what's also really difficult inside of this is who's also claiming to be victimized by a crime. And that's why Mirror Image Arts decided to work with Representative Serena Gonzalez-Gutierrez to run a bill, restitution bill specifically about insurance companies, because insurance companies are claiming to have been victimized by a crime. Thoughts from anyone? Any thoughts about that idea of institutions like insurance companies, ambulance companies, also kind of mixing in and actually creating such an enormous number that even if those that were victimized by a crime actually could be given the money, it's been so complicated at this point, when and how are they actually going to get all of their dollars?
I feel like when you create a for-profit entity, you agree that there's going to be profit and losses. When you registered your business with whatever state you're doing business in, you have made that agreement to pay your taxes, to do what you want with your profits, but also your losses. You are not a victim. It's your cost as an entity of doing business.
Mm. And also, I just want to add, thank you, Philip, for stating that. I also just want to add, I feel like most of the time, insurance companies are making quite a tidy profit generally year over year, continuously year over year comps. And I totally agree with what you're saying, Philip, but also they're still making money. I just wanted to add that in.
Yeah.
Dr. Apryl, I saw you come off mute. Are you going to add something?
Yeah, I mean, I think this should be the example that people need of institutional and systemic oppression, or institutional and systemic racism, that all these entities are tied together, that, okay, we are incarcerating people to get those numbers, to tie it to the insurance agencies. Maybe survivors aren't even truly getting their restitution, but all these other entities are benefiting. So this is a whole for-profit scheme that's even running, that's rooted in the need to systemically oppress people, and especially individuals with marginalized identities.
Thank you. Before I move to the audience questions, because we're at that time, audience, so be thinking of your question if you haven't already put it in. I'm also going to work with my team to figure out how I'm going to get those questions. We'll get that. Shawn, I just want to check in with you too, one last time, make sure you didn't have anything else to add to that.
No, and that's something that I've been asking, is like the payments I make to my restitution, where does it go? Like, I don't know where it goes. Like, I would hope it would go to my victims, but I don't know what I'm giving money to.
Yeah. Thanks for that. That was very clarifying. Okay, so here are some of the questions that are being asked by the audience. All right. Thank you, Julie, by the way. She was very helpful in handing me these lovely sticky notes. Okay, so how do we change the narrative that says we need punitive measures to reduce youth recidivism?
Continuing to have these conversations. Again, I don't think, you kind of said it earlier, and I loved it because I heard that a couple years ago from an artist, that the artist critiqued the rest of us non-artists on, we're just not creative in being creative and thinking about options. And that's the brilliance of artists and creatives, is they can think outside of the box on solutions. And also reflecting on, there are solutions out there. There are suggestions that have been made on alternative models, but why are we hesitant to give them a try? Like I said, the current system is not working for those who've been harmed or those who cause harm. So why not try something new? And that's where we're seeing locally some restorative justice clinics and things like that opening up, and they are trying it. They're doing restorative justice even with individuals who've caused sexual harm, and both parties feel better. The systems feel better by the resolution that they conjointly come up with. So it's for us to continue having these conversations and start exploring the alternatives that are out there and being a little creative in our thinking. We're spending way too much money on this, and we're not getting solutions. None of us feel safe. None of us feel that we're in a place where we are getting justice. So let's try an alternative that would actually get us to our goal.
Thank you, Dr. Apryl. I actually just want to add in there, based on what you just said about the solution not working, I just need everyone who's watching tonight to know that we pulled the numbers. Insurance companies are getting about 6% of what they're asking for from our young people, and yet they're saddling our young people with significant amounts of debt. 6% payout. I just had to add that. And then on top of that, on average, when payment goes up above $1,000 for specifically young people, is what we pulled this information on, it has a 16% payback rate. Under 1,000, I think, and I may be misquoting this, so Julie might be able to help me out, but I'm pretty sure it had a much higher rate. Even then, I believe it was under 50%, but still 16% once the amount goes over $1,000. So when you talk about it's not working, like literally the numbers are showing how much this is not actually working. And I do appreciate you naming the restorative justice clinics. We're going to get to that when we talk about solutions, what we think are solutions later on tonight, but I'm glad that you called that out. I'm super inspired by that work. Philip or Shawn, anybody, did you want to answer that question? We can also move on to another question, so that's okay. I can move on to another. I just wanted to give space. Oh, interesting. Okay, how about this one? What does restorative justice look like for all parties in the legal system?
I think it has to be like a true understanding and connection and working group between the said judicial system and said person who is involved within the judicial system, that they are to the victim. There has to be a different approach in how we categorize these people in terms of criminals and criminal acts and behaviors that are classified as such. I think that we need a shift, you know, in the powers that be in terms of how they view these people. I think sometimes they are a little far removed, both physically, socially, economically, that they can't put themselves back within just being a human being, you know. And so I think there has to be a collective building approach, whereas even just when you're just looking at the way that a courtroom is structured, where the judge is sitting above everybody else, you know, versus like, let's sit in a circle and let's hash this out, right? So I think there's a lot of, I think that's even within just that structure of how a courtroom is structured, there's so many factors that are just played into just that setup alone. And so, and that's just one thing. It's just one thing. But it's almost abolishing the whole thing. Clean slate. Let's start this shit over.
Yeah, thanks, Philip. Shawn, did you want to add anything to that? What does restorative justice look like for all parties in the legal system?
No, man.
That's okay. I got one for you though. I think you might want this one. What can we do to support young people who are incarcerated or formerly incarcerated if we're not involved in direct services?
So something that really helped me out since I've been out is like just having someone to talk to, you know, being there for somebody. Like a lot of people, young people nowadays, like for me, example, like I don't have a good father figure. So I have a mentor, and he took me in like a son, and he's been by my side through my whole journey since I've been out. And it's just like having someone there to talk to, having groups like this, or just being open with one another and like speaking what's on your mind really, really helps. Like just reaching out to somebody and be like, hey, like, how's life? You know, what's going on? Like, how can we help? You know, just reaching a hand out and trying to really be there and support somebody.
Thank you, Shawn. You're actually making me think. Earlier, Apryl said, she mentioned trusted adults. You just mentioned a trusted mentor. And also, Philip, you have also mentioned that the women of your organization really took you under their wing and believed in you even before you believed in yourself. Can y'all talk about that trusted adult component, that mentor? Like, what does that do for, what does that do?
I mean, in this most simplest forms, it gives you a secondary vehicle of strength. You know, it gives you another outlet of sometimes we as youth or people of color or people who have been involved in the juvenile justice system don't have those that surround us that, you know, believe in us. So I think in its most smallest sense, it's just having that that person who, you know, who believes in you. And sometimes it takes just a different perspective where I would have never thought that my lived experience is a strength. Like I said, I've always had to kind of, you know, hide those things. You know, the only person within my undergraduate program that had 2 felonies and at that time 5 boys. So being able to be surrounded by people who are like me, and having that belief within myself, it helps to build, you know, the ego in a healthy way.
Thanks, Philip. Dr. Apryl, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think going back to the question slightly before that, people asking of how can they help in a non-direct care kind of position. Just think about what your role is and how you can be that one trusted, supported person. If you're a business owner, are you hiring youth who've come out the system? I've loved the work that organizations like Dasher or Community Works does to do some outreach and talk about individuals who are in the system and how they are employable and make great employees. And so are you as a business owner or somebody who's working for a small business considering that? That's one way to help be that supportive person to help these young people get back on their feet. So just thinking about your positionality, role, and privilege and how you can leverage that to be one of these trusted adults that is helping facilitate these young people's lives.
Yeah, I love that. So another one that's come up from the audience is about recent legal changes. They want to know, have there been any legislative changes that are in the works already? I'm assuming that might actually have to do with the restitution piece, but I also know that there's been a couple of other legislative pieces that are currently in session right now that actually folks should be paying attention to. So I'm going to name a couple, and then I would love for y'all to piggyback. But for one, in relationship to restitution, in 2020, they passed a bill that actually decreased the annual percentage rate from 12% to 8%. So it actually used to be 12% and now it's 8%. And also they changed the age. So along the way, at one point, youth who are currently incarcerated were still, even without the ability to pay back their restitution, we're still being charged interest rates year over year. And now that can't happen. The interest rates don't go into effect until a young person turns 21. So that's one of the big legislative changes specifically to restitution that happened. But even in Representative Serena Gonzalez-Gutierrez, when we talked about Shawn's story and about other young people we worked with, she was like, and even 8%, like we fought so hard, y'all, this is hard work, even just moving the metric from 12 to 8% on young people with restitution. She fought so hard for that. And then when she heard Shawn's story, she's like, an 8% is like, 8% is still too high. So it's just, that's one of them. The other one that they recently passed was about fines and fees that are assessed in the courtroom, and that a lot of people, young people and families are impacted by those fines and fees. They were able to pass that to alleviate fines and fees now. Anything else? What else would y'all name?
Yeah, just like all the forward movement that Colorado is doing right now, again, another bill that is under consideration this session is to raise the floor bill. And once again, shout out to Representative Gonzalez-Gutierrez for being one of the sponsors of that bill, that we are adjudicating kids as young as 10 in the state of Colorado. And I think she didn't mention that in her opening, 10-year-olds. And again, there's this pushback. Well, what about these such and such 10-year-olds, these criminal, delinquent, all these bad labels to describe a 10-year-old child. And again, from research that myself and other colleagues have done, many of these 10-year-olds who are doing these things might have these difficult histories. Are we giving a 10-year-old a second chance? Are we giving a 10-year-old an opportunity? Your 10-year-olds get into trouble all the time, I'm sure, at home. But it's in the safety and protection maybe of you and the caregivers at the home. Not everybody has that. So this bill to raise the floor would raise the age in which a child can be prosecuted to 13. So again, trying to end that school to prison pipeline that Mirror Image Arts is dedicated to dismantling, at a very early age. We don't need to be criminalizing 10-year-olds.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that one, Dr. Apryl. Philip, did you want to add some?
Yeah, just to piggyback off Dr. Apryl Alexander, I've been, fortunate and grateful enough to be kind of part of the cohort who is helping push this bill forward. Again, I had no idea that my own lived experience would, fast forward all these years later, play into changing the narrative of how we treat young people who make mistakes. It's sad to see that. I was 11 years old, turning 12 years old when I was first charged with the crime. And that was back in, I believe, in 1998. And to look, all these years forward, these predatory practices are still in place. I think with the Raise the Age bill is one factor that we're trying to pull kids out of this stream of the school to prisons pipeline. There are still a lot of work and other avenues that we need to look at, but this bill is definitely an avenue within that stream to start pulling our youth back out. Like I said, very grateful to be a part of the cohort and be led within this policy work to have these changes done. I know there are a lot of other policies that are coming up, some that we can be hopeful for the next legislative session. But I would say the Raise the Floor bill is a very, very strong one that Representative Gonzalez Gutierrez has sponsored us with and has done a very, very, very good job at representing for us. So at this point right now, we are in appropriations, waiting for a date to get to the House. I think we're about to vote away from actually making it through. We've had to kind of, barter a little bit with the people that are in power in order to kind of get this through. But it looks promising. It looks promising. I think for myself, this was the first time I was able to participate in a legislative session to kind of see like the working, mechanisms of how these things are changed. And it was a kind of a double-edged sword. It was a great experience for me to kind of see this and how these things are done. And these are public forums. They're open to anybody. So I could be there whether I was doing the work or not, right? But at the same time, though, it was kind of unfortunate to see and get a personal viewpoint of how some of these people in power view the rest of our community. Even so much so, we had one of the guys literally falling asleep during this same session. So I was like, "Oh, you are the chosen, one of the chosen leaders of the free world, and you are falling asleep." And within this issue that plays so close to home to me.
Yeah. Wow, Philip. Thank you for sharing that. And I was not there that day of the original hearing, but I also heard how courageous and strong y'all were having to be in order to get this bill to raise the floor from 10 to 13 considered and passed. So I just want to also thank you both. I know y'all were working incredibly hard on that and still are, and sending a lot of energy that way, because it's much needed. So one of the things that I also just wanted to mention too, there's an interesting national one that I just became aware of that Senator Bennett, so our own Colorado senator, has just introduced, which is about bringing restorative practices to our schools in a national way. So I'm actually really curious. We might send that out to you as a follow-up with this conversation, but that's a really interesting one that we can all start following, because that's setting a tone to start shifting this, because they straight out call punitive discipline in schools and the alternative to that and claiming that inside of this movement. So I think that's actually one that's really interesting to watch too. So we are coming to the conclusion of our time, but I want to be able to ask this question really quickly. This was one that came from the audience. If there was only one thing that we could do tomorrow to start helping, what would each of you say to them? one thing? April, Dr. April, yeah.
Mine's easy, show up. Like Philip said, we're at that Capitol and we need more voices there. We need more voices to talk about why these issues are important. So becoming informed and showing up is my piece of advice. I'm a board member for the Colorado Juvenile Defender Center. So following some of their work in policy, in telling the stories of these youth that we're interacting with, and then showing up to be next to us at the Capitol next time. So
Yeah.
show up.
Show up, Dr. April. How about you, Shawn? What's one thing that they can start doing tomorrow to help?
Look into it, you know, like make your, how do you say it? Look into it. Look at research, you know, like you can't judge a book by its cover, you know? So,
I hear you. Yeah, go ahead, Shawn.
And like she said, show up, you know, like come support us, you know?
Yeah, I heard you say two things, Shawn, and I'm just going to reflect them back. I heard you say, get informed. And then I also heard you say, listen to the stories. There are more stories to consider. Thanks, Shawn. Philip.
I would say, how can we remove the political process out of the politics? How can we get the politicians to see through a lens of humanity? Right? I think that takes a lot of internal reflection. We are oftentimes, as humans, our ego will then protect ourselves from having to do this inward reflection. I think if we can all collectively start to do a lot of inward reflection, the things that are produced outwardly will then start to at least make a shift and start to change for the better.
Yeah, bring humanity, or take politics out of the political, but bring humanity back in, and then also take a look at yourself.
Yeah.
Is what I heard you say. Yeah. This is our final question. As we opened, I want to end. We had a hard conversation today. We're talking about hard stuff. If we expanded our imagination for healing, accountability, and justice, what might we imagine?
We'd actually be the change that everybody wants.
Hmm.
And we'd have solutions to our social problems. I think we can end many of our social ills, from crime to poverty to food insecurity to housing insecurity. We can end all those. So are we ready to do it right now?
Thanks, Dr. April. Shawn or Philip?
Again, I think I would just imagine, putting the humanity back into being a human.
Yeah, it sounds so simple, but we have so much work to do. Yeah, so much work to do on that. Thanks, Philip. Shawn?
Can I hear the question one more time, please?
Absolutely, I got you. If we expanded our imagination for healing, accountability, and justice, what might we imagine? What do you imagine, Shawn?
That we would all just come together, you know? Like we wouldn't have people fighting for their next meal or people sleeping on the streets, you know? Like we have people making billions and billions of dollars, but we have hundreds of people with no homes, no food, you know? So just having everyone together and just help your neighbor, you know?
Yep. Yeah, I think for me, I want to tap into this, and also audience, please feel free too. Like this is a question for all of us. If we expanded our imagination for healing, accountability, and justice, what might we imagine? And for me, I would imagine a world in which we are not holding the individual wholly accountable, but we are actually taking responsibility as a society for how we have also failed and how we have work to do to continue to support all humans in our society. Audience, please add your thoughts. And I will turn this over to Julie, but I just want to say thank you, Dr. Apryl Alexander, Philip Roybal, Shawn Pollack, for joining me in this conversation tonight, for getting real about this topic, and for sharing your beautiful insights and your humanity with us. So thank you, thank you, thank you.